Hello and welcome to Telesur. I'm Carla Gonzalez. This is Interviews from Quito, the program where we explore the big challenges facing this country and the region. In today's program, we look at what is going on inside prisons in Ecuador. Riots, threats, brutal deaths, and impunity. Dozens have died just in 2019 inside jails, and officials say the amount of inmates surpasses their capacity. Now the government has declared a state of emergency, but human rights activists say nothing has changed, and it keeps getting worse. To discuss that, we have Ricardo Camacho, former Undersecretary of Rehabilitation. But let's look at this video before we begin.
Different violent murders have taken place in the high-security prisons of Ecuador. Several gang leaders have been shot, burned, and even dismembered alive inside prisons of Guayaquil. And public figures like Jorge Glass, who is serving a sentence right now, have been threatened by inmates. Prisoners have access to weapons, drugs, and cell phones, which awakes questions about the efficiency of the penitentiary system of the country. How is this possible? Follow our analysis.
So thank you, Ricardo, for being with us. So tell us, how did we get to this situation, an emergency in our prison systems?
Well, thank you very much for your invitation to Telesur. I'm very happy to participate with you and be able to reach many people. Well, Ecuador lives a complicated situation. The penitentiary system is complicated, especially in Latin America and Africa. In Ecuador, we have approximately 40,000 people in jail. This means that they're 24 hours in the penitentiary center. Ecuador has a capacity for 28,500 people in prison. This means that we have 40% of overpopulation. But when you visit one of these centers, for example, Machala, which is on the border with Peru, we have a center with 200% of overpopulation. Or let's go to Quito. We have a provisional detention center. These are people that don't have a sentence yet to go to a prison. And they have 180% overpopulation. So the main problem in Ecuador is overpopulation, which is complicated with a system that comes from the past, with also the problem of food. Ecuadorian government pays for the food of the prisoners, and they pay 2.50 a day. Multiplied by 36,000 people, this is approximately 36 million a year. Then we have a system of telephone cabins and of like small stores that were not given to people that were.
Let's discuss some of the figures. 40% of overcrowding in the prisons. Does that lead specifically to the violent episodes that we've witnessed in the past month? Just in 2019, 19 people were killed inside prisons. Does that somehow bring about the whole violence that is happening inside our prisons?
Well, it is part of the topic of the violence. This has been growing through years. There are several stages. I think the first one would be that there's a confrontation between organized band members within the prisons. There are two very powerful bands, one Choneros and the other one, and there's one of Alias El Cubano, and he's Ecuadorian. There was always a dispute between these two bands, so they used to kill each other until this fight ended up with the alias El Cubano, who managed a lot of drug trafficking in Ecuador, was killed. And the images were spread. He was pushed out of his cell, thrown out the third floor, and his head was chopped off. And everybody saw it on internet. And then after chopping off the head, they started to play football with his head. And what this shows us is that the other band, took 20 policemen as hostages, and they took them as hostages. But the group showed that they were very intelligent. So they showed that they could not only kill their adversaries, they killed the head of the contrary band, and they could also take hostages, the policemen. So people will ask yourself, like, why do we have policemen within the prisons? And that's a serious problem we have in the country. Ecuador has not developed a system, a strong penitentiary system. If you see in Colombia, if you see in Peru, in Chile, the police in Chile is a strong institution that has grades and uniforms, and according to United Nations, there should be one person, one agent for every 10 people that is in prison. So with 40,000 people, we should have at least 8,000 agents looking over them, because it's not only having control over each one of the parts, but they also have to contribute with the rehabilitation, health, transport people so they can study and work. So this is where the problem is. We have 1,500 agents to do this. So when I was in authority, I can see that there was good people, and some others that were not so straight, they were crooked. Because they are people that don't have, like, this is not a profession. And in fact, the system was created, and there are different grades: Agent 1, Agent 2, Agent 3, Inspector, Inspector 2. But these grades were never created. So you can be a guide for 5 years, and you're always going to have a salary of 550, and it's almost like a minimum wage of any Ecuadorian worker. But you have to be inside a jail 24 hours. And inside the jail, there are too many temptations. Your salary is 550, and you get extra hours. And the next day, you have your work days. And the guide, at the end, after extra hours, they have like $800. But there's no option of escalating. Whenever you start in any type of police or these type of organizations, you start at the bottom, but then you keep on going up, and eventually you could become a general. But here in Ecuador, that has not been implemented. So there's a frustration. They're not well paid, not well trained. So the police, since 4 or 5 years, decided to be present within the prisons. But the police is professional, and they're trained like any other policeman in the world to prevent crime and to investigate. But they were supposed to be just like 1 month inside, and then they stayed for 5 years. When it says that the internal security of the prison should be a problem of the internal forces, because there's a characteristic within the prison, that if you capture a criminal, you can't take care of this person, because there's always going to be a revenge and bad blood among them. So in every part of the world, they think that there should be an independent system, neutral, where the person who is doesn't have liberty can share with another person, with the authority within. But there has to be a pacific, rational, where Ecuador must work very hard.
And so you were part of the state program that took care of the rehabilitation process of prisoners. Did you at any point denounce this, and did it bring any consequences to your work?
Well, I began in the rehabilitation system as a subsecretary in the month of December 2018, and I was up until February 2019. I, as an Ecuadorian, was convinced that when the Ministry of Justice was suspended, there was going to be created a system, some type of a secretariat with the range of a ministry. So I thought this was the historic opportunity of Ecuador to reform all of this system. So in the Ecuadorian jails, like in any other of Latin America, the system is complicated. And unfortunately, in the Ecuadorian jails, everything has a price. So if somebody wants to go out to the patio or have a bed, or everything has a price. So I had a very firm position. And I even saw that there was a phantom ambulance that went into a Guayaquilan prison. And although you can see that the ambulance goes into the center and it's recorded, and what the organized crime, what they did is they bought 21 policemen, and they also paid off all of the security systems so the alarm didn't go off. So I found out about it at night, and the next day I took a plane to Guayaquil. And since I am aware of many systems of security, I went to verify the security system. And I saw the main images. I called the Attorney General, and some months passed, and the Attorney General didn't do much until one day a journalist made this information public, and the government was very unhappy with it. So I had to quit. But of course, my spirit is of service to the country, so it's perfectly fine.
So what do we need as a country to overcome this issue, to actually reform what we've said for the past maybe 20 years? We keep saying the same things on newspapers, on social media, that the prison system needs to be reformed. It needs to be a real rehabilitation process, not just taking in prisoners and letting them die there throughout their lives. What do we need?
Well, the question is, why does the Ecuadorian government doesn't want to have a strong rehabilitation system? And as I said a minute ago, if you see Chile, you have modern jails. In Colombia, it works rather well. And so likewise Peru. When President Correa, 3 regional prisons were built, and they were able to, these prisons opened like 14,000 places for prisoners. There was one in La Tacunga, in Guayaquil, and in Cuenca, the Turi one. In that instant, there was no overpopulation. But the problem in the construction of these prisons was that possibly, maybe they were not told, but maybe the centers were inaugurated before they were supposed to. Like, for example, La Tacunga didn't have water. So we took them all to La Tacunga, because for the first time you could see a cell, not for 20 people, but for 4, and with a bathroom that was humane. That it used to be terrible. But of course, the model didn't work totally. Ecuador was not used to manage centers for 5,000 people. It's like a mini city. If you have 5,000 inmates, and all of the relatives, that's like 20,000 people, and the staff. So the model was not well developed, and it was thought that the La Tacunga prison was going to be filled by the 2020. But surprisingly, we have 2% of overcrowding in La Tacunga. So there are more inmates, possibly because in Ecuador, 28 to 30% of the 40,000 people, inmates, are due to drug trafficking. You would think that they're like Chapo style, but no. But these are, or at least somebody that does manage handle a lot of people. However, no, these are mules. What we call in mules in Ecuador is like for micro trafficking, just a little bit of grams. Of course, it's a crime. We don't allow that drug expenditure, but we have a law that just regulates over 10 grams for consumption. So if somebody goes over 10 grams, you're taken in prison and you have to explain if you're a consumer or not. But we do not tolerate selling. So, of course, we have preventive prison that is very, very bland, and we use it a lot. Here in Ecuador, we have these electronic bracelets that work everywhere in the world. However, here in Ecuador, it doesn't work. A good bracelet can work for 3 or 5 meters. If you take it off in any other part of the world, the bracelet will beep, and immediately the local police will track you down. If it beeps for 3 times, they will take this measure from you and you'll have to go back to jail. But here in Ecuador, as we saw, somebody that was very influential at the time of Mr. Correa, his name was Fernando Alvarado, that was a communications secretary, used a bracelet, an electronic bracelet, and then he just threw it away and left a note thanking everybody. If we had good electronic bracelets, Ecuador could take out of the prisons approximately 5,000 to 8,000 inmates, and totally with surveillance, that's totally good. Chile has 120,000 inmates, but if you see the statistics, the closed regimen, they only have 50,000. The other is semi-opened, but with an electronic bracelet.
Now I want to go back to the issue of human rights that you were mentioning, because now we are also, again, like in the time of the government of Rafael Correa, we're also in an emergency system for the prisons. And now President Moreno has renewed that decree, the presidential decree that declares the emergency. But then there's a lot of resistance to that. A lot of human rights organizations are saying that is not the way to go. Why would you say that? Or have you heard some of their complaints?
Well, when I was in the penitentiary system, I had suggested Minister Pazmiño to speak with President Moreno and suggest the declaration of emergency, because we had serious problems with the food. We had very poor quality food. The inmates are sick of bad food. And Ecuador, we do not allow anybody to receive food from the outside. Everything has to be prepared by a company. These small stores that work inside the prisons, it works fairly well, because the inmates has cash that's deposited to an account, and with your account you can go and take things from the store. And it works perfectly well in other countries. And you can buy water, toothpaste, tissue paper, or tuna fish, something that doesn't affect the security system. Unfortunately, all of these things have not improved. So first you've got this confrontation between bands where there is a winner. There is a band that retains the power, which is the choneros. The second phase of the crisis is that now 40,000 inmates don't really care about the fight with the others, and they just want to pass their time, whatever their sentence has been. But the person has a right to rehabilitate himself. So they want to have a job, but that doesn't work here. I have a right to having a decent store, but it doesn't work. I have right to health. Well, health doesn't work inside the prison. I have right to education. That doesn't work either. So look how serious this is. In Ecuador, the level of people that commit second-time crimes, it must be like 70 or 80%. So of every 10 inmates that are freed, 8 come back to prison. It's just a revolving door. While Chile, President Piñera's, that he is directing the program himself, Chileans are afraid because they're surprised, because their level of reincidence is 40 or 45%. This is of every 10, 4 come back, 4 or 5. They want to go down to 20%. So they're creating a great project of construction of work within the prison system. This project, we've spoken with the people, with the Chamber of Commerce of Ecuador, the Chamber of Commerce of Guayaquil, and we're going to begin a project to strengthen, along with the national government, and to develop this axis. Concretely, about this emergency decree, when that happens is that we are allowed to receive money directly. For example, I didn't have money directly to change light bulbs. Now we have like systems that are digitalized. If a relative wants to go in, visit an inmate, they have to first pass a metal detector. That is a normal one, just like the ones in any airport with the wand. Then you have to go through a metal arch, that if it beeps, then of course you have something metal. Then you have a seat with a hole, and you're supposed to move yourself around. Is to see if somebody has put something inside their bodies. This chair is not of recent, but it works. And what does work, and it works in Miami, it works in Mexico, works in Havana, which is the scanner, the personal scanner, where you have pictures of even your private parts. So with all of these instruments, how can a single weapon be smuggled in the prison? So what I ask myself is, what happened? Well, what happened that the equipments didn't work because there was no maintenance or because they were damaged on purpose. And everything was smuggled in through this phantom ambulance or bringing in food.
Unfortunately, Ricardo, we are running out of time. I'm really sorry, and I hope we could continue discussing, because we are going to continue discussing this issue throughout time in Ecuador. But thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
We've been talking to Ricardo Camacho, former Undersecretary of Rehabilitation, on the situation inside the prisons in Ecuador and how the system needs to be reformed to achieve proper results in rehabilitation. Thank you for watching. This is Interviews from Quito. I'm Carla Gonzalez. Until next time.